Hello and welcome. Francis here. Thank you for coming back to my channel. If this is your first time here, I bid thee welcome. There is a subscribe button below if you would like to help support this channel by subscribing. Also a bell to be notified as to when I upload more content. I'm coming to you from Ghana country, and as such I acknowledge the Ghana people of the Adelaide Plains as being the traditional custodians of the land upon which I reside. So this video is more of, I guess, a social commentary. It does feed into other aspects, in particular, the conference that I did earlier, Return to the Mother, International Women's Day. I did a video for that as well. Basically, the role of women, how women are being perceived in society. And it started off, and this is why I'm putting it out this week, so you've got an extra video, Francis ranting and raving, because if this is not your thing, just end this video now. Because here where I live, there's been a bit of a furor that's erupted in the last week over Baiting SA Incorporated, so SA South Australia. They organise debating, I suppose, competitions or programs for students. And one of the topics for round 3 in this competition or this program for year 9 students, so we're talking about 15, 16-year-olds, is whether the trad wife movement is good for women. And newspapers, of course, these days, just like clickbait, sensationalism. So it was reported in our local rag, and was also reported that parents were up in arms over the appropriateness of this topic. And because I'm a bit of a dinosaur, I hadn't really heard of this movement or not really paid attention to it. I had to Google to see what a trad wife actually was. And Google came up describing a trad wife as someone who promotes domestic duties. Fair enough. I mean, I thought we had moved on from the 50s. Female submissiveness. Red flags are beginning to appear. Someone who puts her husband first, spoils her husband, etc., etc. Okay. So despite that, and that's just a simple Google search, Debating SA have indicated that they consider this as a rather appropriate topic for 15, 16-year-old boys and girls to consider, due to this movement being so popularized on social media. In particular, there's influences given such as Hannah Neelam, I think that's how you pronounce her name, Neelam, aka Ballerina Farm, who has like 10 million followers on Instagram, and also a US-based model, I think she's based in Germany, or she a German-based model in the US. I don't really know, I haven't really paid much attention, but her name is Nara Smith, and she has some 5 million followers on her Instagram account. Again, as I said, I'm a dinosaur. I tend to not go scrolling a lot on social media, except for Facebook. So I had to go and have a look and check out these women's Instagram accounts just to see why everybody was getting upset as to their depiction of life as a trad wife. Okay. Hannah's page isn't what I expected. She appears to be a businesswoman. She has Ballerina Farm. She makes products, or Ballerina Farm sells products. She's into cooking and baking. It's almost like they're very hands-on approach when it comes to the farming, like milking their own goats or cows, whatever they have. She has some 8 children. Now, I don't know how old she is, but she looks probably in her 20s, maybe in her early 30s at a push. But she's got some 8 children. Good for her. And looking at these images, it doesn't appear to me that she is very submissive, dominated by her husband. She appears to be quite a modern woman, even having 8 children. She's appears to be working in partnership with her husband on the farm, whether they own the farm or not. I don't know. I'm not really interested in going to get into the details. She goes to cooking school, or you see images of her in baking, and she's in chef whites or setting up events. So she earns her own money. She's not a stay-at-home wife, as the trad wife label seems to indicate, who's dependent on her husband. She also has 8 children. I think I mentioned that. And when you go through the web page, there seems to be a Christian influence to that, but it's not actually disclosed as to what set of Christianity she belongs to, which again is really no one's business. But hey, she's a young woman. She has 8 children, so obviously she has not a lot of time, but apparently she has a lot of time to run her own business, to cook, to help out on the farm and the like. Good for her. Okay, moving on to Nara. On her Instagram feed, she's also described as a trad wife. She's a model. She's earned her own money. There's a lot of product placement as well. So that's indicating that she earns income from product placement. I'm not dismissing that at all. That's fantastic. Again, she comes across as a very modern woman, businesswoman, very business savvy. How her relationship with her husband is, looks like she's a new mum. She's recently had a baby. Maybe she has a few more children. Good for her. But she doesn't appear to indicate this sort of female submissiveness. Maybe that is what Debating SA are looking at when they allege that this is a good topic for 16, 17-year-olds or 15, 16-year-olds to debate. However, they are still overlooking this submissive quality or expectation of the trad wife. It might be a little bit different to how these young women project themselves as being trad wives, but I think it still needs to be discussed, because this image of submissiveness, especially by women and girls, is being preyed upon by the rise of what's called the alpha male trajectory. So we've got the 2 extremes coming back into play. And this alpha maleness itself has been linked to one particular social media influencer who promotes social sort of toxic masculinity on the social pages, who just happens to be pictured with the article in the local newspaper, who, as far as I recall, was arrested. I don't think he is in jail at the moment, or at least has been known for human trafficking, which usually was against girls and women. He's known for sexual abuse and the like. And of course, you know who he is. I don't need to give him any more media light. Some parents have been reported of defending the topic, saying that it encourages critical thinking, as well as other important skills such as, I don't know, research. Well, I know that myself, it's getting harder and harder to research topics, especially on Google these days. I key in something and I get so much, I'll say crap, things that are not at all what I'm wanting, largely, and it's getting worse largely because of AI. But again, I'm a dinosaur. But some parents have been reported of seeing this topic about the benefit trad wife movement has on womanhood as no different to previous debate topics, such as whether climate change is man-made. I personally can't see any connection. All I see, and I'll be quite honest, is this deepening sort of trend that has long shaped our Western mindset, which basically sees women girls, the female form, as being less than male counterparts. And it's something that we have been fighting for equal rights for hundreds of years. And maybe this is an age thing. Maybe Hannah's parents didn't bake, didn't do any home baking. That's why she has perceived these baking skills as being trad wife qualities. I beg to differ, as someone, regardless of gender or relationship status, can bake, can make bread, etc. I also grew up on a farm that both my parents owned and worked on because it was a partnership. And okay, my father did more work on the farm. However, this was because my mother was also looking after the house and the children, their children, myself and my siblings. And this included baking. So again, I'm struggling to see where Hannah, for example, appears to be the bright and shining sort of successful businesswoman that she is actually classifying herself as a trad wife. Clearly, it is a matter of interpretation. However, in all honesty, for the most part, this term trad wife, when it gets used, it indicates something a lot deeper than baking or posing in a kitchen with carefully placed products from which you are earning your income. There is a deeper, more problematic term or association with trad wife, which relates to the perceived gendered stereotypes, traditional values that, as I said, women have long been fighting against, this expectation that the man, the husband, is the breadwinner. And while a woman's place is looking after the home and the children, let's face it, this 1950s romanticized image wasn't all that rosy for many women going through that era. It devalues the importance and the contribution of women, because as we have seen and we continue to see, this very attitude chips away at women's rights. It disenables her, it disempowers her, and with the rise of the dominant alpha male, I'll call it a syndrome, being pushed out there, what we are starting to see is this trad wife is little more than, and let's call an apple, a sex toy. I also feel that there is more to this saga really than what meets the eye, because what we see also being used is this trad wife idealism that is being offered almost as, I guess, retaliation against feminism, or at least how feminism is interpreted, projected, how it relates to, often erroneously, by patriarchy. And by patriarchy, I'm more than likely referring to often building white middle-aged dinosaurs who see feminism as something against men, which it isn't. In the truth of the word, feminism, the feminist movement, has always been about equality. And of course, I guess you can't be an alpha male if there is equality. So, okay. Let's just pause for a moment. I'll just take a breath and focus on the second point. Am I saying that the trad wife movement is part of a gender war? Not exactly. Because it actually appears to mean different things to different people. what I think is muddying the water is that there are different interpretations. I do know even women, I wouldn't say my age, but a little bit younger, who like staying at home. They've had enough of working and wanting to keep house for their husband. If this is this is what you want to do, go for it. I really don't care. But I think we need to have more defined labeling, because I honestly think that there is something larger at play, and it's just below the surface, and that is the subjugation of women. And we need to look at the facts, especially here in Australia. We are experiencing an increasing rise in domestic violence. I think it's 89% of the victims are women. So it's domestic violence against women. Last year, the rate of what is now being called female intimate partner homicide, where women were killed by their partners or their exes, rose by some 28%. The stats from last year, this is March last year, was nearly 90% of the victims of female intimate partner homicide were women. And I'll link the article below. There is also the increase in what is called or described as coercive control. Number of states and territories, and even the federal government, are pushing through legislation to report this, to lessen this coercive control. And this can be fed into this trad wife movement if a woman is at home with no income of her own. She is then dependent on her husband's finances. And depending on where he sits and how, especially in relation to this alpha male, can we say problem syndrome that we're experiencing, how he views that could actually lead to coercive control. There's also, very well known, the rise in toxic masculinity due to misogynistic influences like the one that I mentioned or showed earlier, who are encouraging younger men, boys, teenagers to follow in their beliefs regarding the degradation of women, of girls, because we do not have positive male role models in our society due to patriarchy. And this has led to the increasing number of incidents occurring even in schools against female teachers. And not to mention that Netflix series, Adolescence. So Debating SA, South Australia's leading debating organisation for skills, considers it appropriate to debate the worthiness of women by using a trad wife as a benchmark. A woman who traditionally is dependent on her husband because she stays at home keeping house. She sacrifices her needs, her desires, her dreams, because her husband is the breadwinner, and therefore what he says comes first. Again, remind me what century we're in. And then there is another question. Who came up with these so-called traditional roles in the first place? Has Debating SA forgotten the backstory as to how women have become segregated in the home to start with? It's all based on control, limiting education and rights, keeping a woman barefoot and pregnant and tied to the kitchen sink so she cannot educate herself, earn her own money, and heaven forbid, actually have a life, let alone a say over her own body even. And we're seeing these rules and legislations changing. This right that a woman has over her own body, especially when it comes around or related to abortion. We're seeing that in the US. We're seeing it being debated constantly here in Australia. And I've talked about this before in the International Women's Day video. When women here in Australia actually only could vote, only could own their own property, only could open their own bank account fairly recently. Now, when it comes to, I think, owning property in their own right, or being able to open up a bank account without having her husband approve it, we're talking about the 1970s. That is not all that long ago. Well, maybe it is if you're 15 years old, but it's still recent enough. Maybe some of these trad wife influencers should sit down with some older women who have been denied an education, a career. I think it was even up to the 70s that a woman could have a career, but once she got married, she had to surrender, especially in the government, she had to leave because it was expected she would then fall pregnant. So ask your mother, ask your grandmother, ask women who were denied independence, the ability to own or even co-own a house, have your name on the mortgage. And then you'll find out just how cutesy it was for them. And yes, there are many rabbit holes that we can easily fall down with this topic, and it beggars belief, however, as to how Dating SA could consider it an appropriate subject for teenagers to debate. More so, I guess, because it's one-sided. The whole context is one-sided, and that's something that, from a personal perspective, I'm getting really tired of seeing. Once again, we are seeing the value of women being weighed up against, being debated, being questioned about our worthiness, how much a woman or the contribution of a woman actually makes to society. Because if she's a stay-at-home mum, she's not contributing to society. However, if she is a working mother, how shame for her, she should be at home. Where is the role of the father, of the husband in that debate? We don't hear it. And this is because there is this patriarchal mindset being played out over and over again. We're constantly hearing or having debates as to who is a woman by definition, who has the right to call themselves a woman, even who has the right to enter women's spaces. Where, I asked you, are the opposing debates? Where are the debates about who is a man? Who has the right to call themselves a man? And if teenagers are being bombarded by this concept of trad wife on social media, how about asking teenagers, impressionable teenagers, to maybe debate the appropriateness of toxic masculinity, or the impact on the alpha male mentality on relationships? Or even, is the role of trad husband a good one for men? I do understand that this clearly is a differing of opinion as to what a trad wife is, especially if the images that we see on social media, like Hannah and Nara, what the younger generation is seeing is depicted as trad wife. To me, they don't fall into that category at all. They seem to be very independent, modern women. I wouldn't call them trad wives. Maybe I've got the whole interpretation incorrect, but when I Googled it, I came up with that red flag word, submissiveness. And it's like women are being pushed down yet again. And now an organization that is responsible for critical thinking in our schools is playing into their mentality, is encouraging that mindset. And it feels that everything, the suffragettes and all I can't even think of the words, the freedom fighters of the 60s and the rise of feminism, the first wave of feminism, the women who put their lives on the line, the women who lost their lives, they've done it for nothing if this is being allowed. And again, as a woman, I feel, why is my gender always being debated about? Why can't we leave it alone? So, a bit of a rant. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you've got any reliable sources as to definitions of what a trad wife is, I would be interested in knowing, because Google and the algorithms of Google came up with my description, and that's not sitting very nicely with me. And it is something that I honestly feel should be stamped out in the younger generation. And it's almost ironic because where I work, when I was sort of like preparing, when I actually came across this article, I then got an email from our intermediate team saying that this month, June, is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Well, the two seem to feed into each other. In my mute. Anyway, I'm going back to my cave because I'm such a dinosaur. Let me know what you think below. Blessing.